Tory MP Suella Braverman has been forced to deny that she would defect to Reform UK if she loses the upcoming Tory leadership contest. The former Home Secretary is reportedly struggling to garner enough support from within her party to get that top job. Sources from both sides now expect her to jump ship. Is that the right thing to do, though? What do you think she should do? Joining me now is GBNews political reporter Olivia Utley to explain what is going on with the Tories at the moment, Olivia, and good luck with this one.
Well, exactly. It's a bit of a minefield. I think it's very unlikely that Suella Braverman is going to defect to Reform. This was a story that was published in the I paper last night, and there are indeed sources from both the Conservative Party and the Reform Party who are saying it's likely. Suella Braverman herself, though, has roundly denied the rumours, and most senior Conservatives don't seem to think that that is likely. It all stems from comments that Suella Braverman made over the campaign trail, where she said that Nigel Farage and Reform should link up with the Conservatives, that the Conservatives should be a broad enough church to incorporate someone like Nigel Farage. But it was very much she thought that Reform should be joining the Conservatives rather than Conservatives like her joining Reform. I think there is perhaps a very narrow path to Suella Braverman ending up joining Reform. She is probably going to put her name forward for the Conservative leadership race, but it looks a bit for now as though her campaign is dead before it's even really started. There are a lot of Conservative MPs on the right of the party who are jostling to become the sort of primary contender for the right-wing candidate for the final two of the leadership ballot. You've got Suella Braverman, you've got Priti Patel, you've got Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister, you've got Kemi Badenoch. And then on the sort of more centrist side, though I don't think it's completely... Tom Tugendhat is sometimes branded as a lefty, which I don't think is quite right. But you have Tom Tugendhat. So there are lots and lots of people on the right jostling for position. Suella Braverman has lost the backing of some key people who backed her at the last leadership election. So Danny Kruger and Miriam Cates among them. They've put their support behind Robert Jenrick. There could potentially be a situation where Suella Braverman does put her name forward, ends up with very, very little support and decides to jump ship because she'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. And it does sound very much as though Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson and the other Reform Five are very keen to woo her.
Interesting. And Kemi Badenoch is also a favourite among Conservative members, isn't she, for this leadership? And they have to do something fairly soon, don't they?
She is a favourite among members of the party. She's not quite so popular, as far as I can tell, among members of Parliament. She has a bit of a reputation for being a bit tetchy, a bit snippy. She sometimes has a go at journalists in press conferences. And there are Conservative MPs I've spoken to who think that when you have such a relatively small rump of an opposition, you're not really in a position where you can be kind of tetchy to journalists. You've got to be, sucking up to people a little bit, or at least talking to people in the tea rooms and showing your softer side to get people to listen to what the Conservative Party has to say. So I think it's possible that Kemi Badenoch doesn't even make it onto the final two, which goes to the members, even though, as you say, she is popular with the members. As for the question of whether they'll do something soon, the Conservatives have said in the immediate aftermath of the election that they wanted a bit of a breather. Plenty of senior Conservatives pointed out to me that now they are the opposition rather than the government. They didn't feel that they needed to rush the contest too much because whoever wins will be leader of the opposition, but they won't be Prime Minister, which is obviously far more important. That said, I've spoken to Ben Houchen, the mayor of Tees Valley, who is now actually the most senior Conservative, most powerful Conservative, at least, in the country. And his view is that the Conservatives should just get on with it. He says that we know, basically, what all of these Conservative candidates think about pretty much everything. They've all either been senior cabinet ministers before or they've run for leader of the party before. So sort of what's the point of hanging around? I think the general consensus will be that it'll all be wrapped up probably just after the Conservative Party conference in the beginning of October. There's a theory that the final hustings will be at the Conservative Party conference. There is a question mark, though, over whether Rishi Sunak will sign off that plan. Does he want to hang around for another 3 months? Don't think I would if I were him.
I completely agree with you on that one. Olivia Utley trying to explain what's happening with the Conservative Party at the moment. Right, OK, let's see what my brilliant panel make of this one. This hour, I'm joined by founder of youth Vote UK Alex Cairns and former Conservative Special Advisor Charlie Rowley. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Not thank you so much for telling me that it's actually chucking it down with rain outside. I was getting used to the long, hot summer day we were having. Now, lots and lots of you have been getting in touch, by the way, about the migrant crossing situation, seeing as we have just been discussing Suella Braverman and our joining Reform UK. And lots of you saying, William, why didn't the Coast Guard take the boat they seized back to France? They should rename them Illegal Taxi Service. Whereas Fairy Fitzy, I'm not sure that's your real name, says a migrant lodger for every Labour voter, and basically blah, blah, blah. Martin, you say those who voted Labour, hang your heads in shame. Your vote has destroyed the country. Very strong words coming in on that conversation. So this is kind of linked to it. This is Suella Braverman jumping ship, no pun intended, considering we've just been talking about boats coming out in yachts. Now they're coming over, evidently, across the channel. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Charlie. Suella Braverman and Reform, do you think that's a good fit?
It may be for Suella Braverman, and it may be for Reform. I'm sure they would love to have a former Home Secretary, someone who's actually held a cabinet position.
That's quite a few to choose from, to be fair.
Their ranks. But I don't think it's the right move really at all. I think, look, the idea that Suella Braverman is now having to sort of say, no, I'm not quitting the Conservative Party, even before the leadership firing gun has even been sort of shot off, if I can put it like that. And she wants to sort of throw her hat into the ring for the leader of the Conservative Party. The idea that there's this conversation about her leaving to go and join Reform is not a good look for her. But, she's lost support because I think most people recognise that the Conservative Party has to heal. It has to have someone that brings people together after what has been a cataclysmic defeat of the Conservative Party, not one that anybody would have wanted, certainly, or at least for me and anyone else. But the idea that she's then done the complete opposite by being even more extreme in her views, even more isolationist in terms of, and her rhetoric is doubled down. That's not something that has frightened MP colleagues, and which is why people are talking about Robert Jenrick being the more sensible of the two in terms of the right, and people like Tom Tugendhat.
He has been backed by sort of like people on the right and the more centrist side of the party, hasn't he? Kemi Badenoch is also getting a lot of support amongst Conservative Party members. Alex, what do you make of this situation? I mean, the one thing people are saying on here about Suella is she spoke very strongly about the small boat situation, whereas at the moment Labour have been in power for 2 weeks, and we seem to be more and more coming over on a daily basis.
But what's interesting is when I speak to actually some Tory friends of mine, they talk about the fact that she's a one kind of topic issue leader. Contender, and that's not really what they need. Everyone knows that immigration should be, top of the agenda, but it's not the only thing, and she really does really just talk about that. And I actually agree with Charlie. She's been quite critical of the party for some time, and that's actually going to hurt her, because actually it was quite obvious, fair enough, the Rwanda plan wasn't working, but she kind of kept talking about it. That didn't help other colleagues of hers. That didn't help the party from a polling perspective, and now she's expecting everyone to kind of forgive her and actually unite the party. That's probably why Tom Tugendhat is probably ahead in those polls, because actually he looks as a centrist figure that can probably, not so much the left, but the more moderate, conservative, small c, and the more kind of extreme conservatives together. And that's why Tom, I think, potentially would definitely go to the members. Whether he'll win with the members is interesting, because the members, let's remember, picked Liz Truss, right? We've got to remember that, and that was a disaster. So, on paper, who the parliamentary party versus the members want will be completely different in my mind.
Yeah, interesting. Lots of comments. Tom Tugendhat is not the right PM material. He is on the left, and they need someone more right-wing. That's from Sheila. Keep those comments coming in, by the way. A lot of you getting very, very uptight about this situation, about what people are doing. I just also, the Labour Party, right? OK, they have hit the ground running, according to some, but given some of the comments we're having on here and the small boat situation, Charlie, is the honeymoon period coming to an end?
I think it is. I think it'll come to an end quite quickly, because there is a huge juxtaposition, I think, within the country. You talk to anybody and trying to be sort of, open and not as political partisan, but there has been a shift where, look, the Tory chaos within government, that has gone, a new government has come in, this idea of change, I think, has settled the country a little bit. But that will only go so far, as you say, because you've got a government that, where there was a low turnout in terms of the vote, but has now already pledged to nationalise your energy, nationalise your railways, nationalise whatever else, that has to increase
Let prisoners
taxes.
out is another thing we hear a lot of people complaining about.
Exactly. Taxes will have to go up at some point. You know, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, forgive me, you know, will want to paint the picture as the economy isn't totally being tarnished, even though actually they've been left not a bad position with inflation down, but we can have all of those arguments. But I think that is not a government that I think most people really wanted. They voted for change, but they don't think this is the change that they wanted. And they certainly didn't want, I think, ever closer ties to the EU. They certainly wanted the small boats crisis to stop. Is this the way in which it's going to stop? By giving even more money to France, by having sort of an amnesty on the 90,000 backlog cases that we have in this country already? I don't think that's what the public want. Do the public want to release prisoners early? Yes, of course, failures of the past to not build the prison places, but I don't think releasing prisoners, again, is something that the public wanted or voted for or were told about. So I do think this honeymoon period, whilst there is a quite a welcome change, but the change that we're going to see is not something I think the public will want to see for much longer.
Alex, very quickly, I'm running out of time, unfortunately. The honeymoon period, is it over? And lots of people, lots of viewers and listeners saying that today they are sick of Labour already, certainly with regards to migration.
I don't think the honeymoon period can be over. You know, it's literally been, what, has it been 2 weeks? The reality is, it was going to be a big change. I appreciate that, you know, as Charlie said, it was a low turnout. You know, Labour didn't necessarily get, 45% of the vote, 40% of the vote. So I do get that. But in fairness to Labour, it's going to take some time. You know, I know there was actually a really interesting dialogue between Kemi and Angela Rayner about houses, for example. And, you know, proof's going to be in the pudding about, how many houses, 1.5 million they want to build. You know, they've got lots of ambitious plans. We've got to give them time. You know, the Tories had 14 years. There's a lot of time. You know, we could go through, we know we don't have time, we could go through the metrics there. So the honeymoon period can't be over in 2 weeks, to be fair.
You've never been on honeymoon yet, though, have you? Come back to me when you have. Come back to me when you have.